The Forgotten War. From 1950 to 1953, the Korean Peninsula became one of the deadliest battlefields of the 20th century. It was the war the world forgot. A war without victory parades, without peace, without end. A land torn apart by ideology, consumed by fire, and frozen in time. More than 3 million lives were lost. And yet, history remembers it only in whispers. This is the story of the Forgotten War. When World War II ended in 1945, Korea expected liberation. Instead, it was divided. At the 38th parallel, Soviet forces occupied the north. The Americans took the south. What was meant to be temporary became permanent. Two governments rose from the rubble. In the north, Kim Il-sung, backed by Moscow. In the south, Syngman Rhee, supported by Washington. Each claimed to rule all of Korea. Each prepared for war. As the Cold War deepened, the peninsula became a loaded gun, waiting for someone to pull the trigger. At dawn on June 25, 1950, the silence broke. 75,000 North Korean soldiers poured across the border, their Soviet-made T-34 tanks crushing everything in their path. Seoul fell within 3 days. Southern forces were in chaos, undertrained, outgunned, outnumbered. The United Nations responded swiftly. Under American command, troops from 21 nations sailed to Korea. Among them were young men who had survived World War II and others barely old enough to shave. They were told it would be a short war, but they were wrong. By August, UN and South Korean forces had been driven to the edge of the peninsula, a small, desperate pocket around the southern port city of Pusan. If the line fell, the war would be lost. But here, surrounded and battered, they made a stand. In unbearable heat, men fought, bled, and died to hold the perimeter. American artillery thundered day and night. And against all odds, they held. Then, in September, came one of the boldest gambles in modern warfare, the Inchon Landing. Under General Douglas MacArthur, UN troops launched an amphibious assault at Inchon, far behind enemy lines. It was a brilliant stroke of strategy. The landing caught the North Koreans completely off guard. Within days, Seoul was liberated. The tide of war had turned. MacArthur, confident of victory, ordered his forces north, past the 38th parallel, toward the Yalu River on the Chinese border. He told his men they would be home by Christmas. But he was wrong again. In October 1950, as UN troops neared the Yalu, hundreds of thousands of Chinese soldiers crossed the frozen river under cover of night. They came silently, in endless waves. They called themselves the People's Volunteers, but they carried the fury of a nation. At the Chosin Reservoir, US Marines were surrounded. Outnumbered, outgunned, and freezing in temperatures below -30 degrees, they fought their way out, dragging their wounded, their dead, and their dignity with them. The war had changed. Now, it was no longer about uniting Korea, but about preventing another world war. By 1951, the front lines had stabilized near the 38th parallel, exactly where the war had begun. For 2 long years, both sides fought over the same ridges, valleys, and trenches, hill by hill, meter by meter. Villages burned. Civilians fled. Children hid in the ruins as artillery shells tore the sky. The soldiers called it the meat grinder. Every inch of ground cost lives. And while politicians negotiated, men died in silence. By 1953, the war had claimed millions, yet neither side could claim victory. On July 27, 1953, the guns finally fell silent. An armistice was signed at Panmunjom, but no peace treaty. The war ended exactly where it began. Korea remained divided. North and South, still at war, at least on paper. For the men who fought, there were no parades, only silence. No medals for triumph, only memories of survival. And for the families torn apart by that border, the separation has lasted a lifetime. Today, the scars of that war still shape the world. The Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ, stretches across the Korean Peninsula, one of the most heavily armed borders on Earth. Over 36,000 Americans, 180,000 Chinese, and millions of Koreans lost their lives. It was the Cold War's first fire, and its smoke still lingers. The world called it the Forgotten War. It reminds us that freedom always has a cost, and that peace is not the absence of war, but the courage to remember it.